Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and let us know where you are listening in the comments. My son banned me from his wedding, but he still had the nerve to send me a bill for $80,000, an invoice printed in tasteful serif type on heavy cream paper, the sort of paper that makes a person feel small when they hold it. He even scribbled a note at the bottom in that neat, aggressive handwriting of his. Thank me for letting you contribute. I sat at my kitchen table in the quiet of my Lexington home, the October light slanting through threadbare curtains, a thin beam pooling across my coffee mug and the worn oak grain. The envelope had arrived that morning, addressed by hand, and when I saw his precise lettering I thought, because foolishness is a habit fathers have when it comes to their sons, that it must be an invitation. I imagined an embossed card, a gentle request, perhaps even a sentence asking if I'd walk him down the aisle the way we used to joke when he was little and believed I could fix anything. I broke the seal with my thumbnail, breathed once, and tipped the contents onto the table. Out came pages. Not an invitation. Pages. Itemized. Brutally clear. $50,000 for the Ashford estate. Exclusive use. The contract said, as if the sky would close its clouds and the sun would pour its light through their ballroom windows only. $20,000 for catering. Imported wines, lobster flown in from Maine, 200 guests expected to marvel at canapes nobody would remember the next day. $10,000 more for the Maui honeymoon suite, a glass-fronted grotto with a private strip of beach the size of an honest yard. And then his message. Dad, after the problems you've caused the family, be grateful that I allowed you to contribute. This covers your share. Send the check soon. Victoria and I are counting on it. I read it once, twice, a third time. The words did not change. Problems, I murmured, and my own voice sounded unfamiliar in the quiet kitchen. I set the pages down and looked at the photo on the windowsill. Kevin at 8 in his Little League uniform, one crooked front tooth, a grass stain on his knee, his hand crushed into mine. He'd been laughing at something I'd said, head tilted back, eyes squeezed shut with joy. My chest tightened as if a belt had cinched itself around my ribs. I crumpled the note. I smoothed it flat. Rage came like heat at first, fast, softening the edges of everything. And then it hardened, cooling into something cleaner. I stood and ran cold water over my hands at the sink. It didn't clear my head, but watching the thin stream cut across my knuckles helped me sense, beneath the shock, the bones of a plan. Across the table lay my father's pocket watch, the chain dulled by decades of sweat and time. When I lifted it, it ticked steadily in my palm. My father carried that watch through winters on a factory floor. He saved to buy me steel-toed boots for my first job and held my shoulder when I came home with a busted lip because I'd answered back to a foreman who'd called me boy. I slipped the watch into my pocket and felt the familiar weight settle against my thigh. The watch would walk with me into this particular storm. Kevin hadn't always been like this. He started as every child starts, hungry to be loved, drinking up whatever goodness you pour into him. Elena used to say he looked at me the way a sunflower looks at the sun. She'd meet me at the door after a double shift and whisper, "He won't sleep until he feels your heart." And I'd lift him and feel his bird-thin chest against mine and smell the warm, milky sweetness of a boy's neck. Back then we were a trio, reckless and certain. Picnics at Jacobson Park, tossing a tennis ball to our old mutt, Rusty. Pancake Saturdays when Elena piled them higher than seemed sensible with blueberry syrup she insisted on warming. Then cancer came into our house like a thief. In 2015, it combed through our drawers, took our savings, took my wife's strength day by day. I took a second mortgage, then a third. I fought with the insurance company. I sold my car. I sold my gun safe. I sold my records. I learned the names of chemicals I wish I could forget. And after Elena died, Kevin called me and said, "You should have done more, Dad. If you'd planned better, saved more, climbed higher, maybe the treatments could have." He never finished that sentence. Maybe he couldn't. Grief is a clumsy sculptor. It carved resentment into him. It carved guilt into me. We cut ourselves on those edges for years. The first time Victoria came to my house, she looked around at my furniture and smiled with her lips shut, the way people do at a museum exhibit that confuses them. She complimented the curtains, so quaint, and crossed her ankles in a way that told me she had studied how to cross them. She liked words like elevate, curate, bespoke. When I brought in tamales on Christmas, Elena's recipe. I'd written the measurements in pencil on a card. I watched her lean toward Kevin and whisper. He said, "Dad, we're vegan now. And you should text before you come. It's awkward if you just show up." That was the last Christmas I tried. After that, he called on birthdays, sometimes, and sent me pictures of drinks with square ice and men in suits laughing with their mouths more than their eyes. The suits got tighter, the smiles sharper. He began to say we when he meant she. We think this neighborhood's transitional. We think that working-class ethos is nostalgic but limiting. The boy who used to hand me screws while we built a treehouse started using words like he was cutting steak with them. I told myself the phase would pass. I told myself grief is a storm and storms end. But entitlement isn't weather. It's scaffolding. He built a life around it. I closed my laptop lid, then opened it again. I typed a name, Ashford Estate. Their website sparkled, midnight blue and gold. Where love meets legacy, it promised. Photos cascaded. A stone terrace bleeding into a lawn shaved like a jawline. A ballroom ceiling that looked like a wedding cake turned inside out. Sconces throwing warm light on champagne flutes. Availability, November 15th, booked. I trespassed through Victoria's public posts, which glittered with arched eyebrows and champagne flutes, and yes, she was exactly the kind of person who tagged brands in photos. She tagged the estate. She tagged the florist, Fleur and Field, a company that used words like foraged and artisanal to describe peonies. She tagged the photographer, a woman named Leia with a portfolio of brides looking like softlit swans. She tagged the caterer, Elite Events. She tagged a travel agency, then a resort in Maui whose promotional video followed an actress with wet shoulders walking out of the ocean like a seal that had swallowed a diamond. Every detail was there if you had the patience to scroll. Mark Brennan's site listed a phone number and a gallery with captions like Samantha plus Eli, Intimate Garden Soiree, and Marcus and Julie, Timeless Grandeur. Mark promised discretion, which meant he knew everything about the people he served. Discretion was exactly what I needed, and, ironically, what I would use against him. When he answered my call, he sounded surprised to be speaking to someone's father. "My clients typically handle funding privately," he said in a tone that meant, "We never say who pays, because money is a delicate word for people who have a lot of it." "Your clients," I said, "banned me from this wedding and sent me the invoice. I'd like to see you in person." He suggested his office. I suggested morning. He said, "I'll be ready." I didn't sleep red. I slept stony. Morning came gray and soft. The building where Mark rented space tried to look like it had never had dust in it. He greeted me with cologne and an outstretched hand and teeth that loved cameras. We sat. He started with pleasantries. I answered with facts. Kevin's note was clear. I said, "Pay the bill, stay away." Mark's smile faltered. I wasn't aware of that arrangement." "Then you should be aware of this one," I said, sliding the invoice across his desk with my finger on the total. "You will tell my son that his event has no funding from me unless he calls me and speaks to me as a son speaks to a father. Not as a client to a vendor. Not as a prince to a purse." Mark glanced at the contracts. He stood and paced a neat length across the carpet. "Deposits have been placed," he said. "Balances are due next week. The estate is strict. The caterer is stricter." "I am strictest," I said, and I smiled in a way that felt like slipping a wrench into a machine. "You know the trade. One rumor from you, and people start to worry. Whisper that funding is uncertain. Whisper that the father has been insulted. Whisper that a name cannot be relied upon." I couldn't possibly. "Of course you can," I replied. "And you will. Because if you don't, and this wedding collapses anyway, and it will, you will be the planner who watched a slow-motion wreck and did nothing. That's not your brand." Mark's eyes flicked to the wall where a framed magazine cover called him the architect of elegance. He swallowed. "I'll call Kevin," he said. He started to offer me coffee he didn't want me to drink. I declined. When I reached the door, he muttered, too softly for most men, "But I've worked in places where whispers carry. God, he's arrogant." The first pebble slid down the slope. But I had learned something the hard way from grief. Do not rely on a single pebble. You need rainfall. You need gravity. You need time. I drove to a place that smelled of paper and ink and old carpet. The bank. I asked to speak to an advisor, not a teller. The man they gave me wore a tie the color of old coins. "What can we do for you, Mr. Torres?" he asked, and I told him. Take my son's name off any account he can currently access. Remove him as authorized user from my card. Passcode protect every interface that touches my money. Freeze quick transfers. If a yacht salesman shoves a slip with my name across a desk, I want the system to laugh. We can set up alerts, he said. But if he's already an authorized, he's not, I said. Not anymore. I had unhooked him the previous year when his emergencies tripled. Still, we strengthened the walls. He set a note on my file. Do not discuss accounts with third parties, including relatives, without verified password. I left with a new debit card, a new passphrase, and the satisfying knowledge that if Kevin called the bank would be a brick wall. I drove to the county records office next. I asked for a clerk with tired eyes, and she gave me the kind of look civil servants save for men who think they'll be the exception to policy. What do you need? She asked. Records, I said. My house. My name. My name alone. She pulled it up. You're fine, she said. No liens. No other owners. You still paying taxes on time? Every quarter, I said. If anyone asks, I'm stable as a mountain. Nobody will ask, she said. Unless they need something from you. I smiled. They do, I said. Not for long. Allies. I needed one more ally. When I thought of loyalty and photographs and a pair of eyes that had known my son before the teeth and the suits, I thought of Alex. He had lived in our guest room for 3 months in 7th grade when his parents were too busy destroying their marriage to care for him. He has a scar on his right shin from where he tripped climbing our fence at dusk trying to catch fireflies. He is the kind of person who returns tools in better shape than he borrowed them. Now he was a licensed PI with a camera and a license and the patience to wait in a car for hours. When I called, he answered with honest surprise. Mr. T? Stephen, I said, you're 32. Call me Stephen. He laughed, then grew quiet and listened. He banned you, he said flatly, and then sent a bill. 80 grand, I said, with a thank you. Victoria, he said, as if that explained the shape of the wind. She's the kind of person who turns a mirror into a stage. We met at the cafe on Broadway where the coffee tastes like coffee and nobody pretends otherwise. We hugged the awkward hug of 2 men who have known each other in 3 different chapters of life. He slid into the booth and put his camera bag on the seat beside him like a sleeping animal. I told him the plan. I would not pay. I would force a conversation. If the conversation never came, the wedding would wither on its own vine. He would document the withering. Not to post, I said. Not to humiliate blindly, but to have the truth when the lies come. Alex sipped his coffee and nodded, slow. I'll be outside the estate on the day of. I'll watch vendors. I'll watch guests. I'll listen. I'll send you what I see. I thanked him, and for a moment we were back in my kitchen in 2005, him eating my spaghetti and telling me Kevin cheated at Monopoly by slipping money under the board. People tell you who they are, he said then. The way a good detective can turn a truth into a sentence you can carry. Days ticked down. The planners called their vendors. The vendors began to call each other. Rumors grow legs faster than truth does. Mark's assistant left a message that was mostly consonants. The florist emailed the planner asking whether financial assurances were in place. The estate's accountant wrote a curt message requesting updated payment calendar, please. Kevin called me. I let it go to voicemail, and then I played it over on speaker twice at my kitchen table, the way a person touches a bruise. Dad, he said, trying for casual and landing in strained. The planner says there's a misunderstanding with your, participation. Call me. We'll sort it out. He waited 3 hours and called again. This is serious, he said. The casual burned off. People are threatening to cancel. You can't just, this isn't funny. Victoria texted, this is petty. Families contribute. I blocked her number and sat with my tea, letting chamomile pull the sting from my jaw. Kevin left one more voicemail that night. If you don't fix this, you'll regret it, he hissed, and then there was a quiet, the sound a man makes when he hears himself and doesn't like the recording. I saved every message in a folder labeled with the date and the plain word, calls. Neighbors call when storms are brewing. Mr. Ellis from over the fence phoned me in the middle of Wednesday to say he'd seen Kevin at the print shop screaming at a clerk over a crease in a stack of programs. Told the kid he would ruin his reputation in this town. Ellis said, snorting the way men snort when they see a fool careening toward a ditch. Then asked if they knew who he was. People don't forget that kind of thing. Mrs. Hargrove from the club where she plays cards texted to say there was talk and that I should know in case I wanted to tell my side. I told her I didn't have a side. I had a decision. The thing about living somewhere long enough is that your town becomes a soft net. It catches you when you fall. It also catches your lies. 2 days before the wedding, I made one last call to the estate itself. I asked for the manager, a man named Roland whose emails read like they had been proofed by an English teacher who feared exclamation points. When he said hello, I introduced myself. He was too professional to sigh out loud. "Mr. Torres, we have appreciated working with. I'm not working with you," I said. "That's the problem." A silence. "We were assured your contribution." "My contribution," I said, "was demanded, not requested, while I was instructed not to attend. I will make no payment to anyone. Proceed on the strength of whatever promises you have from my son." To his credit, he did not scold me. "Thank you for the clarity," he said. "I will adjust accordingly." Adjust accordingly. There are phrases men only use when they know they are about to tell a difficult truth to a glamorous client. The day before the wedding, Alex began sending me pictures in the morning. A tent going up, white as a tooth. A pyramid of champagne coupes covered with a tarp when the wind lifted. A tray of gold chargers carried, then carried back. Men in black polos pointing at a clipboard and then pointing at the sky as if the sky could sign a check. By noon, he texted, "Florist reloading van. Driver said can't leave $12,000 in product with no guarantee." At 2, string quartet canceled. Planner arguing into phone. At 4, estate manager speaking with Victoria's mother privately. She's crying. He's stiff. Looks done. At 5, caterer delivery refused. Half deposit unpaid. Every notification steadied me. Not because I like wrecks. Because I have been the man under a wreck so many times I can smell the oil and the smoke. This time, I was upwind. On the morning of November 15th, rain came. Not the pretty kind that makes brides dab their eyes and call it romantic. Real rain. Hard, cold, nearly sideways. The sort of rain that has a job to do and hates being interrupted. I brewed coffee and stood by the window. My phone buzzed. Alex, 7 a.m. Estate staff moving tables inside. Power flicker. Guest message boards lighting up logistics. 8:30, planner in panic mode. Estate accountant asking for wire proof. No answer. 9:15, Roland closes ballroom doors. No access until obligations met. When Kevin called at 9:30, I answered, because the script required it. "Dad," he said, dropping the hay. His voice had an edge of boyhood to it, the way it used to sound when he'd skinned a knee and didn't want to. "Mark says you've refused to pay. The estate is threatening to shut it down. We need you to come through." "Victoria is." "You banned me," I said. "You sent me a bill anyway." He tried to laugh. It came out brittle. "Come on. You know how appearances work." "Appearances?" I repeated. "You mean the part where you have a father who raised you after your mother died, but what you want to show strangers is a story without him in it." He inhaled. "Don't make this about your feelings," he said, and it would have been funny if it hadn't been so sad. "This is logistics. You have money. Families contribute. You sent me a note that said be grateful I allowed you to contribute," I said. "I owe you nothing." There was silence long enough to taste. Then the voice I knew would come. "If you don't fix this, I'll never forgive you." The trick of threats is that they require leverage. I didn't flinch. "I hope one day you forgive yourself," I said, and I hung up. At noon, Alex sent a photograph of guests huddled under umbrellas, the sides of their shoes dark with mud. He sent a video of Victoria in her gown by a window, hands pressed to the glass, the makeup that had been sprayed to last a hurricane cracking, because tears are salt and salt wins. He sent a photo of Roland speaking to a small knot of men, groomsmen, maybe, gesturing toward the gate with his palm flat in the air. He sent a photo of the caterer's truck pulling away. The rain kept coming. Not once did the sky look at a calendar and consider mercy. At 2, the pounding came at my door. I knew what it was the way a man knows a storm by the smell of the dirt. I checked the peephole and saw them. Kevin in a suit that looked like a costume under a poncho, hair plastered, eyes wide. Victoria like a drowned swan, tulle clinging, eyeliner smudged into something raccoonish and human. I opened the door because I am not a monster. The rain pushed cold fingers across the threshold. "Dad," he said, stepping in, dripping on the mat, "please." Victoria followed, her wet train slapping the tile. Stephen, please. We can salvage. An intimate ceremony. Back at the estate. The planner can reconfigure. We just need money, I said. Me? Help? Kevin pleaded, and the word had the correct shape. He ran a hand through hair that wouldn't be told what to do. It was a mistake, he said quickly, the ban. We thought. Look, Victoria's friends, the tech executives, it's about optics. We handle optics. He said optics like a man says oxygen. Victoria stepped forward, palms out. It was my fault, she said, and I couldn't tell if she meant it. I pushed. I wanted perfection. We didn't mean to hurt you. The honeymoon is non-refundable. Please. The house smelled like damp wool and fear. I folded my arms. Would you value me without my wallet? I asked, and watched the question thread its way through the space between us. Kevin's face worked. He said, of course, and then, because he is him, he added, but success has standards. He tried to smile, appeal to the part of me that remembers his baby hands. You understand, he said, and there it was again. The assumption that if he explained entitlement long enough, it would sound like a principle. No, I said gently. I don't. I stepped aside and opened the door. You wanted me gone from your image. Learn what that means. He swallowed. Something like anger flickered, then collapsed. You're destroying us, he said, but he said it like a person who hears himself too late. Help me, he said then, and I will remember that last sentence until I die. Help me, Dad. I regret it. All of it. If he had said those words a week earlier, even a day earlier, maybe we could have built a bridge across the wreckage. But that's not how he had written the story. Consequences aren't cruelty, I said, and I closed the door. They stood there for a heartbeat, two figures in the rain. Then they moved away, the wet whisper of fabric, the slap of shoes on stone. I leaned my forehead against the wood, felt the cool seep through. My pocket watch ticked. That night, the florist posted a neutral note about unexpected circumstances. The string quartet posted a photograph of a cozy indoor gig and wrote, sometimes plans change. The estate put up a single line on their private calendar, Torres/V, date released. People who had hoped to eat lobster ate pizza in their cars. The gossip slid around town like rainwater seeks downhill. Neighbors texted me things I didn't ask to know. Victoria's mother blamed me at first, and then blamed her daughter. Kevin yelled at a groomsman and then apologized to him because his hands were shaking. Roland handled everything without raising his voice, in the manner of men who know exactly what they can control. Alex came by the next day and put a flash drive on my table. I won't use any of it unless you ask, he said. But if the story starts walking around without you, you'll need these shoes for it to wear. I thanked him and put the drive in a drawer with the warranty for my stove. Kevin did not call for 3 days. On the 4th, he texted, I can't believe you did that. I didn't answer. On the 5th, he wrote, I can't believe I did this to us. I stared at the words and then put the phone face down. A week later, I burned the invoice in the fireplace. Paper curls into itself in fire as if it is ashamed to have existed. The edges blackened first, then the numbers wavered, then the total lifted like a ghost and vanished. I felt lighter. Not triumphant. Not vicious. Just lighter. The way you feel when you take off a heavy coat you didn't realize you were wearing. A strange thing happened then. People I hadn't expected to look me in the eye did. Mrs. Hargrove stopped me outside the post office and said, You reminded me that boundaries aren't unkind. They're honest. Mr. Ellis invited me to sit on his porch and drink lemonade that was mostly ice and say nothing while the evening softened the edges of the neighborhood. Mark Brennan sent an email that said, I handled what I could. For what it's worth, you were right to insist on respect. Roland from the estate mailed me a handwritten note on Ashford stationery. We are sorry for your loss. Not of money, but of place. You did not deserve to be removed from your son's story. Wishing you peace. I read it twice and felt something in me that had been clenched for months finally exhale. You think the world will come at you with pitchforks when you refuse to be used. Sometimes, instead, it comes with chairs and says, sit with us a while. About a month later, when the town had absorbed the gossip and turned it into compost the way towns do, Kevin knocked on my door at 11 in the morning. He was alone. He wore a sweatshirt with the collar stretched out, the way he used to, and sneakers that weren't brand new. He held his hands in front of him as if he were approaching a ledge. Dad, he said. I looked at him and said, Come in. Because whatever else is true, he is my son. He sat at the table where the invoice had once lay, and he stared at his fingers. We did a small ceremony, he said. At the courthouse. It was small. He laughed once, without joy. I didn't tell you because I didn't know what to say. You didn't tell me because you were ashamed, I said, and I did not make it a question. He nodded. I've been talking to someone, he said. Therapist. She told me to start with what I got wrong. Not what you got wrong. What I got wrong. He looked at me then, a clean look. I was cruel. I liked power. I liked how it felt to be above things. I treated you like a purse with a heartbeat. I blamed you for things that were never your fault because it was easier than blaming the world for taking Mom. He rubbed a thumb across his knuckle the way he did when he was a boy losing a game and trying not to cry. I'm not asking you to make me feel better, Dad, he said. I'm asking if you'll let me try to be different near you. With no money involved. With no favors. Just, if I can be your son again one day. We sat with that. The pocket watch ticked. Outside, a delivery truck hissed to a stop and then sighed when it pulled away. Somewhere in the house the pipes talked to each other in that way old pipes do. I poured coffee. We drank. He told me about the conversation he had with Victoria afterward, about how she cried, about how she said standards, and then said, I'm sorry, and then didn't say either one for a while and just looked at the floor. He told me he quit the job that paid in adrenaline and replaced it with work that paid less and hurt nobody. He told me he volunteered on Sundays at the hospice where Elena had died, and I had to get up and stand by the sink for a minute because the kitchen felt too small for both grief and relief. I didn't forgive him in a sentence. Forgiveness for me isn't a light switch, it's a dimmer. You turn it, and the room changes by degrees. But that day, I put my hand over his for the first time in too long, and he did not pull away, and I didn't either. You don't owe me money, I said finally. You owe me honesty. He nodded. I can pay that, he said. We went for a walk after, the kind where you notice the things you never notice in a car. The way Mrs. Patel's wind chimes sound different in winter, the way the sidewalk lists slightly near the elm, the way your breath makes a little cloud if you talk and walk at the same time. He told me about a fight he'd had and how he had not won, but had not cheated either. He told me he missed his mother and that he had said it out loud for the first time in years. Some people want revenge to be a firework. They want the sky to light, the crowd to gasp, the sound to thump their ribs. What I wanted, it turned out, was quieter. I wanted a door I could close when somebody tried to walk through me. I wanted a chair across from mine that might one day be occupied again by the boy who used to say I was the strongest person he knew. I wanted dignity. You don't buy dignity. You claim it. You guard it. You wait for the people you love to notice it standing there, patient as a tree. When spring came, I drove out to Jacobson Park and sat on a bench near the ball fields. A kid I didn't know smacked a ball and ran like his shoes were on fire. His father hooped, a sound too big for the air, and I felt that sound in my own throat like a memory catching. I pressed a palm to my pocket and felt the weight of the watch. I thought of Elena's laugh. I thought of Alex in my booth, camera bag beside him like a content cat. I thought of Roland's stiff courtesy and Mark's magazine and the florist's calm decision and the string quartet packing up gracefully and the rain doing its faithful job. I thought of Kevin at my table saying help me, and me saying no, and how both sentences were, in their way, gifts. When your child tells you who they are, you have a terrible responsibility to believe them, and to believe they can be more than the worst thing they have been. That responsibility is heavier than any check. In June, I got a postcard from Maui with no return address. On the front, a picture of a beach I recognized from a travel video I had once watched with contempt. On the back, in block letters, saw this with my own eyes. It wasn't as perfect as I expected. The water was colder. The sand stuck to everything. We argued about sunscreen. We laughed anyway. Thank you for the rain when we needed it. K. I set the card on the mantel. I stood and looked at it until my eyes stung. Maybe the honeymoon didn't need my money for it to mean something human. Maybe love is what you make when the plan collapses and you are barefoot and angry and still decide to see each other. This is how my story ends, for now. With a kitchen that smells like coffee and worn wood, with a watch that ticks steadily in a pocket against my thigh, with a town that resettles around me like a quilt after a restless night. My son banned me from his wedding and billed me for the privilege of being banned. I did not pay. I did not attend. I did not step into the mud to hold up a tent that should have fallen. I watched the storm do what storms do. I closed my door. Later, I opened it again, to a man who had remembered that a father is not a fund, he is a person. If you got this far, thank you for listening. If you felt, as I did, that anger can harden into something that keeps you upright, take this part with you. Justice can be quiet. It can look like a bill curling into ash. It can sound like a door closing gently and then, on another day, opening with its old familiar squeak.